Miguel's crying filled the entire house. The sound echoed through the hallways, filled with innocent despair, as if the little one felt his mother's absence, even though he had never met her. Gabriel held the baby carefully, rocking him gently in an attempt to calm him down, but nothing seemed to work. His heart was heavy. In the last few days, his life had turned upside down in a way he could never have imagined. Just 4 days ago, he was a married man, focused on work and building a future with his wife, Julia. Now he was there, holding his sister-in-law's son in his arms, not knowing what to do. Camila, Julia's twin sister, had died during childbirth, leaving Miguel with no one. The child's father was unknown, a man who disappeared as soon as he found out about the pregnancy. Now, Gabriel was the only person left to take care of the baby. The sound of quick footsteps echoed in the hallway, and soon the living room door was thrown open with force. Julia came in, her eyes full of impatience, her face contorted with irritation. She stopped in front of Gabriel, crossed her arms, and snorted loudly. "Make that baby stop crying," she said, without any trace of compassion. "I can't stand this infernal noise anymore." Gabriel felt a tightness in his chest. He looked at Julia, searching for some trace of the woman he had fallen in love with, but all he found was coldness. How could she be so insensitive in the face of everything that had happened? "Julia, he's just a baby. He misses his mother. And what do I have to do with this?" she retorted impatiently. "He's not my son." Gabriel took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. "He's your nephew, Julia. The only thing left of your sister. How can you be so cold?" Julia snorted again, her eyes narrowing. "My sister was a fool, Gabriel. She chose to die to save a baby who will only be a burden. I would never have made that choice." Her words were like a knife in Gabriel's chest. He blinked in disbelief, trying to process the coldness with which Julia spoke about her own sister. Camila knew that the pregnancy was high risk, but she still chose to move forward, fighting for her son's life. And now, her own sister was treating her like a fool. "I can't believe you're saying that," Gabriel muttered, shaking his head. "We have to take care of him. We're the only ones left." Julia let out a bitter laugh, crossing her arms even tighter. "We?" she repeated sarcastically. "You may even want to play father, but I don't want to know about this baby. He's going to the orphanage." Gabriel stopped rocking Miguel for a moment, shocked by his wife's coldness. How could she be so insensitive? "You can't be serious." "I'm being very serious, Gabriel." Her voice was firm, hard as stone. "I'm not going to raise someone else's child. This burden is not mine. I will not let this destroy our lives." Gabriel held Miguel close to his chest, feeling the baby hiccup through his cries. His heart was torn between shock and revolt. How could Julia be so cruel? "He's just a baby, Julia. He's not to blame for anything. And neither am I," Julia shouted, anger shining in her eyes. "I will not give up my life for this child." She took a deep breath and then said something that chilled Gabriel's blood. "It's either me or him. Choose." The silence fell between them like a crushing weight. Gabriel felt his chest tighten as he looked at Miguel, still crying in his arms. How could he choose? How could he simply abandon that defenseless little being? Julia crossed her arms impatiently. "I'm waiting, Gabriel." He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision on his shoulders. But deep down, he already knew what his answer would be. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Gabriel looked at Julia, expecting some sign of regret in her words, but found nothing but coldness and impatience. She was really waiting for him to give up on Miguel. He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the choice his wife was forcing him to make. His arms instinctively hugged Miguel to his chest, as if to protect him from Julia's hard gaze. "You can't be serious, Julia." Gabriel's voice was low but firm. "I've never been so serious in my life." She rolled her eyes. "I've already lost my sister. I'm not going to lose my life for a baby that isn't even mine." Gabriel felt a lump form in his throat. He wanted to believe that Julia was just shaken, that the pain of loss made her act like this. But deep down, he knew that wasn't the case. Julia had always been practical, calculating. She always put her own desires above anything else. "He's your nephew, Julia. Don't you feel anything for him? Not even a little compassion? Compassion? Julia let out a dry laugh. I am not obligated to raise someone else's child. This baby was not meant for me. Being here, Gabriel, my sister made a ridiculous decision. She threw her own life away. I would never have done the same. Her words came as a shock to Gabriel. He had known Julia for years, but he never imagined she could be so cruel. You talk about your sister as if she was stupid for wanting to save her own child. Wasn't she? Julia narrowed her eyes. She knew the pregnancy was high risk. She knew she could die, but she chose to continue. She chose this baby over her own life. And now what do you expect? That I carry this burden for her? Gabriel felt his blood boil. This burden, as you call it, is an innocent baby, Julia. A baby who will destroy our lives. She interrupted angrily. Have you thought about what will happen if you decide to keep him? You'll have to change your entire routine, give up your freedom. You'll have to wake up at dawn, change diapers, feed, pay bills. Do you think it's worth sacrificing all of that for a child that isn't even yours? Gabriel closed his eyes for a moment, trying to contain his anger. He didn't want to argue. He didn't want to turn this into a war. But at the same time, he couldn't just accept her words. He looked at Miguel, who was now sobbing softly, his eyes red from crying so much. The baby was scared, confused, not understanding anything that was happening. Gabriel took a deep breath. If you were in your sister's place, what would you want me to do? Forget you? Abandon your child? If I were in her place, I would have made the right choice. I would have saved myself. Gabriel felt a shiver run down his spine. My God, Julia, do you really think so? She crossed her arms impatiently. Yes, and I hope you think right too. Because if you insist on this, Gabriel, I'm leaving. I'm not going to raise this baby. He felt a huge weight on his chest. He looked at Julia, then at Miguel. Deep down, he already knew what his choice would be. But he needed to be sure that there was nothing else to be said. So that's it? If I stay with him, you'll leave me? Julia shrugged. I'm not going to be that brat's mother. It's up to you. Gabriel pressed his lips together, his heart pounding. Are you asking me to choose between an innocent baby and you? Exactly. Silence fell over the room again. Gabriel felt his heart racing. Julia looked at him impatiently, waiting for an answer. He took a deep breath and finally made his decision. The silence between them was suffocating. Gabriel felt his heart racing, his mind spinning with the weight of the decision Julia was placing on him. Miguel, now calmer, was nestled in her arms, his eyes swollen and tired after so much crying. Julia kept her arms crossed, impatient. Her cold eyes stared at Gabriel, as if he were a problem to be solved, and not her husband. I'm waiting, Gabriel. Choose. Me or him. Gabriel felt a lump tighten in his throat. How could Julia treat this situation so coldly? Miguel was just a baby, completely helpless. He hadn't asked to be born. He hadn't asked to lose his mother during childbirth. Now, his own aunt saw him as a burden that needed to be discarded. Are you really willing to leave because of this, Julia? He asked, his voice coming out lower than he intended. She rolled her eyes. Don't make me out to be the villain here, Gabriel. I'm only thinking about our future. This baby has nothing to do with us. He's not our son. I'm not going to waste my life raising a baby that shouldn't have been born in the first place. Her words were like a punch to the chest. Gabriel closed his eyes for a moment, trying to contain the anger that was rising inside him. Camila gave her life for him. You should respect that decision. Respect? Julia let out a dry laugh. I don't respect stupid choices, Gabriel. My sister made hers, and now I'm making mine. I choose not to carry the weight of her irresponsibility. Gabriel felt his fingers tighten around the blanket that wrapped Miguel. He looked down at the baby in his arms and knew in that moment that he couldn't abandon him. He looked up at Julia, who was still staring at him, waiting for an answer. You want me to choose? Then I will. For a moment, she seemed to relax, convinced that he would make the obvious decision. Good. Then let's get this over with. I can call an orphanage tomorrow. No, Julia stopped talking. I choose Miguel. Shock showed on her face. What? You heard me, Julia. Gabriel kept his voice steady. If you really think you can force me to abandon an innocent baby to satisfy your selfishness, then you are not the woman I married." Julia stood still for a moment, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. But then her expression changed. Her eyes narrowed and her mouth set in a hard line. "Are you going to throw away our marriage because of a baby that isn't even yours?" Gabriel looked at Miguel, who was now watching everything with a curious and innocent look, unaware that his life was being decided at that moment. He looked at Julia and gave the definitive answer. "I'm not the one throwing anything away, Julia. You're the one doing it." Silence fell over the room once again. Julia clenched her fists, her face red with anger. "Is that how it is? You prefer this child to me? I prefer to do what's right." Her eyes flashed with hatred. For a moment, Gabriel thought she was going to attack him. But then, something changed. She took a deep breath, took a step back, and pointed to the door. "If that's what you want, then go away. But know one thing, Gabriel. I will never accept this baby, and I will never forgive you for exchanging me for it." Gabriel didn't answer. He just turned and went upstairs without looking back. Now, he knew what he had to do. Gabriel walked up the stairs with Miguel in his arms, feeling the weight of the decision he had just made. His heart was racing, and his mind was spinning with 1,000 thoughts. He never imagined that his life would change so drastically in such a short time. But, looking at the small baby nestled against his chest, he knew there was no other choice. Julia would stay behind. He entered the room and looked around. There were clothes scattered around, suitcases in the corner, and some furniture that used to be part of a couple's routine. Now all of that seemed insignificant. His life with Julia ended there. He picked up a suitcase and started throwing some clothes inside, without even bothering to organize. Then he grabbed a smaller backpack and carefully put some of Miguel's clothes and diapers in it. He felt a lump in his throat. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he couldn't stay here. Downstairs, Julia was still pacing back and forth, huffing and puffing with anger. When Gabriel came down the stairs, she crossed her arms and stared at him with pure contempt. "Are you really doing this, Gabriel? Are you leaving here because of this child?" He paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and answered firmly, "I'm leaving because I no longer recognize the person you've become." Her eyes flashed with anger. "I haven't become anyone. I only know what I want in life, and I don't want to raise a baby that isn't mine." "I do." Gabriel hugged Miguel to his chest. "And I won't let him be treated like a burden." Julia took a step forward, pointing her finger at him. "This will ruin your life, Gabriel. Don't you understand? You have a career, dreams, a future. Do you really think you'll be able to handle a baby alone?" Gabriel held his suitcase tighter. "If necessary, yes." "You're a fool." He gave a small, sad smile. "Maybe, but I'd rather be a fool with a heart than someone who abandons a baby to live an empty life." Julia clenched her fists. For a moment, it looked like she was going to scream, but then she took a deep breath and walked to the living room door. "Then go." She opened the door without even looking at him. "Go away, Gabriel, and don't come back." For a moment, he hesitated. Part of him still wanted to believe that Julia would change her mind, that she would realize the mistake she was making. But when he saw the coldness on her face, he knew that wouldn't happen. He gathered Miguel in his arms and walked through the door, out into the cold night. The wind blew against his face, and he felt a shiver run through his body. But at the same time, a strange feeling of relief washed over him. He had made the right decision. As he walked away from that house, he kissed Miguel's forehead and whispered, "It's going to be okay, little one. I promise." The door closed behind Gabriel, and the silence of the street enveloped him. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm that was raging inside him. The cold night wind hit his face, but he didn't hesitate. With Miguel in his arms, he began to walk without looking back. The baby, still restless, moved in his lap, letting out small sobs of exhaustion. Gabriel felt the weight of responsibility fall on his shoulders all at once. He didn't have a plan, he didn't know where he would stay, but he knew he wouldn't be going back to that house. He took his cell phone out of his pocket and quickly searched for nearby hotels. He couldn't go back to a friend's apartment or a relative's house. That would only give Julia an opening to try to interfere. He needed a quiet place where he could think about what to do next. After a few minutes of walking, he found a small hotel. Nothing fancy, but clean and discreet. He went into the reception, and the receptionist looked at him curiously when she saw a baby in the arms of a clearly exhausted man. "I need a room. Something simple, just for a few days." She typed something into the system, and in a few minutes gave him the key. "Will you need anything for the baby? A crib, milk?" Gabriel sighed, feeling a knot in his throat. Forming in his throat. "Yes, I think so. I have nothing but what's in the suitcase." The attendant smiled kindly. "I'll see what we can get you. You can go up. Room 205. He nodded and walked slowly up the stairs. Miguel, now calmer, snuggled against his chest. The weight of reality was starting to set in. Upon entering the room, Gabriel placed the suitcase on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. He looked at Miguel, who was watching him with big, innocent eyes. "What now, little boy? How are we going to do this?" The baby just blinked, sucking his tiny fingers. Gabriel smiled slightly, but his heart sank. He had never taken care of a baby before. He had no idea how to change a diaper, calm a crying baby, or put a child to sleep. But now he had to learn fast. That night, the challenge began. The first problem was Miguel's hunger. The baby cried and writhed, and Gabriel tried everything, rocking him in his arms, singing softly, even giving him a bottle of milk that the attendant had brought. But nothing seemed to satisfy him. "Calm down, big boy, what's wrong now?" The hours passed in a blur. Gabriel barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, Miguel woke up crying. Exhaustion began to weigh him down, but he couldn't complain. That was the price of his choice. The next morning, when he went down to have coffee in the hotel's small restaurant, he felt like a zombie. He had dark circles under his eyes, his muscles ached, and his head felt heavy. That was when a soft voice caught his attention. "Excuse me, you look like you need help." He turned and saw a woman standing next to him, dark-haired, with her hair tied in a simple bun and kind eyes. She looked at Miguel tenderly. "My name is Anna. Can I hold him for a moment?" Gabriel hesitated, but something in her gaze made him trust her. Without thinking much, he handed Miguel into her arms. And then, something incredible happened. The baby, who had been crying all night, calmed down instantly. Anna began to rock him gently, murmuring soft words, and Miguel closed his eyes. Gabriel watched her, surprised. "How did you do that?" She smiled. "Experience helps. I'm a nanny." And at that moment, Gabriel knew that perhaps he had found the help he so desperately needed. Gabriel looked at Anna holding Miguel so naturally and felt relief run through his tired body. The baby, who had cried all night, was now sleeping soundly in her arms, as if he had found the peace he had been searching for. "Are you an angel or some kind of baby whisperer?" he asked, exhausted but grateful. Anna laughed softly, shaking her head. "Nothing like that. I just know a little about babies. I've been taking care of them for years." "So you're a nanny?" She nodded. "I've worked as a nanny for a few families, but right now, I'm out of a job." Gabriel ran his hand over his face, thinking. He needed help, and here was a woman who seemed to know exactly what to do. "I have no idea what I'm doing, Anna." He sighed. "Miguel's mother was my sister-in-law. She died giving birth, and now I'm the only person he has. But I don't know anything about taking care of a baby." Anna studied him for a moment, as if analyzing every word. "You can learn, but no one learns alone." He nodded. "If it's not too much trouble, would you agree to help me?" Anna hesitated, looking at Miguel, then at Gabriel. "I know it may seem strange to take on a job so quickly, but I'll accept." Relief washed over Gabriel. "Really? That would be a lifesaver for me." She smiled. "But there's something you need to know first." Gabriel frowned. "What?" Anna took a deep breath, as if gathering her courage. "I recently lost a baby." His chest tightened. "I'm sorry, Anna." She gave a small, sad smile. "Thank you. It was really hard, it still is. But there's something else?" "What's wrong?" She looked down at Miguel, hesitant. "I'm still breastfeeding. If you want, I can breastfeed him." There was silence for a few seconds. Gabriel didn't know what to say. He looked at Miguel, so small and helpless, and then at Anna, who was offering something so generous. "Are you sure?" "Yes. I know it sounds strange, but Miguel needs breast milk. It can help him get stronger. I just want to help." Gabriel felt a wave of gratitude rise up inside him. "Anna, I don't even know how to thank you for this. She smiled. You don't need to thank me. Let's just take care of him. Together. At that moment, Gabriel knew he was no longer alone. The days passed, and Gabriel and Miguel's routine began to stabilize. With Anna's help, he learned how to change diapers, identify the baby's cries, and even put him to sleep without much difficulty. But above all, he felt immense gratitude for Anna, who took care of Miguel as if he were her own son. They moved into a small, simple, but rented apartment. Comfortable. Gabriel was slowly getting back to work, balancing his responsibilities with caring for the baby. Despite the challenges, he never regretted the decision he had made. Then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. Gabriel was sitting on the couch, playing with Miguel, when his phone rang. He looked at the screen and felt a chill run down his spine. It was Julia. He hesitated for a moment before answering. What do you want, Julia? Her voice was soft, almost gentle, something he hadn't expected. Can we meet? I want to talk. Gabriel pressed his lips together. After everything that had happened, he didn't want any contact with her. But something in her tone seemed different. About what? About Miguel. His heart sank. Julia, if you called to convince me to give him up, forget it. The decision has already been made. It's not that. She sighed. I just want to see my nephew. I think I was too harsh. Can I come over tomorrow? Gabriel was silent. He never imagined that Julia would change her mind. Did she really regret it? Okay, but know that nothing will change my decision. I know. See you tomorrow. He hung up the phone, still suspicious. Something told him that this rapprochement wasn't as simple as it seemed. The next day, Julia arrived at the agreed time. Anna was in the kitchen, while Gabriel received her in the living room. She looked different. Her face was more serene, her clothes simpler than usual. But her eyes still had that cold glow that he knew well. Hi, Gabriel. She smiled slightly. Julia. He watched as she looked around, her eyes landing on Miguel, who was sleeping peacefully in the portable crib. He's all grown up, she commented, taking a step forward. Gabriel crossed his arms. What do you really want, Julia? She glared at him, feigning offense. I just want to meet my nephew. Can't I do that? Before he could answer, Anna entered the living room with a cup of tea. She stopped when she saw Julia, her gaze automatically becoming suspicious. Who is she? Julia asked, looking at Anna with interest. This is Anna. She's helping me take care of Miguel. Julia smiled at the corner of her mouth, but there was something in that smile that made Gabriel stay alert. How interesting. A nanny? Or something more? Anna, who had remained silent until then, just smiled politely. Just a friend who wanted to help. Julia nodded slowly, but her eyes shone with something Gabriel couldn't identify. Well, I'm glad you found help. She approached the crib and looked at Miguel. For a moment, it seemed like she really felt something for her nephew. But Gabriel knew Julia too well to trust that. He's adorable, she said softly. And that's when Gabriel realized Julia was hiding something. But what? In the days that followed, Julia started to appear more frequently. Always with a smile on her face, she brought Miguel gifts, asked about his health, and showed interest in her nephew's routine. To anyone on the outside, she looked like a regretful aunt trying to get back together with her family. But Gabriel knew something wasn't right. Julia had never been the type to change her mind so easily. Her coldness on the night of their separation still echoed in his mind. So, why was she showing so much interest now? Gabriel's suspicions grew even more when he noticed that Julia was paying a lot of attention to Anna. Whenever she could, she would ask questions about her. Do you really trust this nanny? He asked casually one afternoon. Gabriel, who was playing with Miguel on the couch, looked up, frowning. What do you mean by that? Julia shrugged. Nothing special. I just find it strange that out of nowhere a woman appears and becomes part of your life like that. You don't even know who she really is. Gabriel let out a heavy sigh. Anna has been a great help to me. She loves Miguel and has done for him what no one else has done. Exactly. Julia narrowed her eyes. Why would someone care so much about a baby that isn't even theirs? Her nagging began to bother him. She lost a child, Julia. Maybe she sees Miguel as a chance to give love to a child again. Julia smiled sideways, but it was a smile full of ulterior motives. Or maybe she has secrets. You should do a little more digging into her past. Gabriel rolled his eyes. Enough, Julia. I'm not going to play your game. She held up her hands, as if she didn't want to argue anymore. I'm just saying that sometimes people aren't who they seem to be. Over the next few days, Gabriel tried to ignore Julia's words. But no matter how hard he tried, a seed of doubt had been planted. And then something happened that made him question everything. One night, while he was putting Miguel to bed, Julia sent him a text. I think you want to see this. Address attached. Gabriel stared at that. He held the phone for a few moments. The message was accompanied by two addresses. The first was the house where Anna had lived before working with him. The second was of a family she had supposedly worked for. His heart sank. Was Julia manipulating him? Or was there something he really needed to know? The doubt consumed him throughout the night. The next day he made a decision. He went to the first address. He knocked on the door, and after a few seconds, a middle-aged man answered. Do you know Anna? Gabriel asked, feeling his heart racing. The man narrowed his eyes. Anna? Yes, she worked for us a few years ago. But if I were you, I would be careful. Gabriel felt a shiver run down his spine. What do you mean by that? The man crossed his arms. Just stay away from her. Don't trust her too much. And, without further explanation, he closed the door. Gabriel stood there, feeling an uneasiness growing inside him. Could Julia be right? Could Anna not be who he thought? Deep down, he didn't want to believe it. But something inside him was beginning to question everything. And that was how he made the biggest mistake of his life. The weight of doubt consumed Gabriel. No matter how hard he tried to ignore Julia's words, what the man had said at the door wouldn't leave his mind. Don't trust too much. What did that mean? He spent the rest of the day restless. He watched Anna interact with Miguel, as she always did, with affection, patience, and dedication. But now, her every gesture seemed filled with uncertainty. That night, while Miguel slept, Gabriel decided to confront her. Anna, I need to talk to you, he said, crossing his arms. She turned to him, noticing the tension in the air. What happened? Gabriel hesitated for a moment, but then went straight to the point. I went to the house of a family you worked for before, and they told me not to trust you. Anna's face lost its color. What? Who said that? A man. He didn't want to give me details. He just warned me. So, I need to know. Are you hiding something from me? Anna blinked rapidly, looking surprised. Gabriel. She took a deep breath and crossed her arms, as if trying to find the right words. I don't hide anything from you. But I've worked for people who didn't like me. Some families, they were complicated. Gabriel pressed his lips together. That's too vague, Anna. You need to be honest with me. She stared at him, feeling her frustration growing. Honest? Since the day I got here, I've only tried to help. I took care of Miguel as if he were my own son. And now you're accusing me of what? He shook his head. I just want to understand who you really are. Anna swallowed, hurt by his words. If after all this you still doubt me, then maybe I shouldn't be here. She took a step back and, without saying anything else, turned and left. Gabriel stood in the middle of the room, feeling a crushing weight on his shoulders. He should have trusted her. But now it was too late. The days that followed were dark. Without Anna, Gabriel found himself alone with Miguel again, and the routine that had been difficult before became almost impossible. The baby seemed more restless, cried more often, and Gabriel could barely sleep. But the worst of all was the guilt. It was only after Anna was gone that Gabriel realized what had really happened. Julia had manipulated him. She had played with his feelings, with his insecurities, and he had fallen for it. One day, while holding Miguel in her arms, he felt a tightness in his chest. He needed to fix this. Without wasting any more time, he picked up the phone and called Anna. He rang once, twice, 3 times, until finally she answered. What do you want, Gabriel? Her voice was cold, distant. He swallowed hard. I made a mistake. Anna said nothing. I shouldn't have doubted you. I let Julia poison me. I was an idiot. But Miguel misses you. And I miss you too. The silence on the other end was painful. Forgive me, Anna. I can't do this without you. She sighed. Gabriel, I don't know if I can go back. He felt a tightness in his chest. Please, come see Miguel. That's all. If you want to leave after that, I understand. Another silence. Then, Finally, she answered, "Okay, I'll go." And in that moment, Gabriel knew he had one last chance. The next morning, Gabriel woke up anxious. The phone on the table next to the bed seemed like a constant reminder of his last conversation with Anna. He looked at Miguel, who was sleeping peacefully, and felt his heart tighten. He had hurt her. He had doubted her when she only wanted to help. Now he didn't know if he would have a second chance. Late in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. Gabriel took a deep breath before opening the door. Anna was there, her gaze cautious but firm. "Hi," she said softly. Gabriel swallowed hard. "Hi. Thanks for coming." She entered hesitantly, her eyes immediately finding Miguel in the crib. As soon as the baby saw her, he let out a sound of joy and stretched out his little arms. Anna's expression softened, and Gabriel felt a wave of relief as he watched her pick Miguel up so lovingly. "He missed you," Gabriel murmured. Anna smiled slightly. "I missed him too." The silence that followed was heavy. Gabriel knew he needed to say something. "Anna, I messed up." She didn't answer, just watched him waiting. "Julia manipulated me. She knew exactly what to do to make me doubt you. And I fell into the trap. But now I see that I was a fool. You're the only person who was truly there for me. And I ruined everything." Anna took a deep breath, adjusting Miguel in her arms. "I'm not going to lie, Gabriel. It really hurt to hear you question my honesty after everything." He nodded, his eyes full of regret. "I know. But I don't want this to be the end. I want you to stay, not just as Miguel's nanny, but as part of our family." Anna blinked in surprise. "Family?" Gabriel stepped forward, gently taking her hand. "I realize that I don't want to do this without you. I want us to be together, like a real family. I know I messed up, but if you give me a chance, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me." Anna's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" Gabriel smiled. "I've never been so sure of anything in my life." She bit her lip, looking at Miguel, who was resting peacefully on her lap. "Then I'll stay." Joy exploded in Gabriel's heart. He approached her and hugged her, feeling that, finally, the pieces of his life were falling into place. Months later, Gabriel and Anna made their relationship official. They got married in a simple but loving ceremony. Miguel grew up surrounded by affection, with two parents who loved him more than anything. As for Julia, she never tried to interfere again. Her plan failed, and she disappeared from their lives. And so, Gabriel, Anna, and Miguel formed the family that destiny had chosen for them. Because, in the end, a true family is not just made of blood ties, but of love, loyalty, and second chances.